Truman Plaza area plan public workshop number 2. Tonight's meeting is focused on mobility. So how you get around the area, your neighborhood, in and out of Truman Plaza. My name is Lou Breaker. I am the project manager for this project and the planner for the 4th Council District, which is the eastern portion of Truman Plaza. And I'm joined here with Lauren Young. She's the planner for the 5th District, and Jonathan Beverson, who's the planner for the 3rd District. We have some other city staff from our Public Works Department here, Bailey and Reagan, and then Grant and our team from Shockey. So welcome. The agenda real quick is I'm going to update you on where we've been in the process and what this process is for a few of you who have maybe not been to one of these meetings. Then Jonathan's going to go over transportation analysis that we did in-house with staff, where we're hoping to get some feedback from you on what you'd like to see, what your goals are, or how you move around Truman Plaza. And then Lauren's going to lead us through an exercise on what we call image streets and gateways. Those are those primary roads that are kind of iconic for Truman Plaza, and those areas where you clearly come into Truman Plaza from a different part of the city. So briefly, the last time we did this was in 2012, so it's been quite a while. And Truman Plaza is about 10 neighborhoods that is roughly bound by downtown with Woodland on the west. On the east, we have part of the Blue River, and then that very last railroad track before the river, and then north we have Cliff Drive and the Bluffs, and in the south we have I-70. So the area plan is a long-range vision for those 10 or 12 neighborhoods that are within Truman Plaza. And it establishes goals and guidelines for what we want to see in the future for a number of things, including bikes and sidewalks, which we'll talk about tonight, but also housing and the types of buildings that are constructed. And they guide investments later on into roadways through like capital improvement projects and HIAC. They don't commit funding. This is not a process in which the city commits money. And they don't create new code requirements, and they do not change zoning, but they will guide zoning. So to be proactive, these kind of identify the projects and the actions that the community wants to see. So since we're talking about mobility, let's say you really want to crosswalk in a certain part of Truman Plaza, and we put that in as an actionable item in the plan. When your neighborhood goes to apply for a HIAC, you can point to this plan and say, hey, we've already identified this, and that might get your project related in the HIAC process. These guide city budgeting. If we identify through this, when we talk about the high internet network, that we need to do significant road work, if it's identified in this plan, when Bailey's team goes to get capital improvement money, they can say, well, we've already looked at this before, we've already seen that this is an issue that the neighborhood has talked about. And the biggest thing that it does for us as planners is it helps us guide development projects and proposals that come in. So when a developer wants to develop, say, the Harvesting Complex, we have this area plan that has these guidelines for what that development should look like. So this is not the only plan happening in this area. Through Mid-America Regional Council, we're working on 2 other projects. The first one is Independence Plaza and Forgotten Homes. This is a Planning Sustainable Places grant in which we're looking at connectivity and housing issues, and that's generally bound by Independence Avenue to the north, the Paseo on the west, I-70 to the south, and Benton Boulevard to the east, right where we're at now. And so it's like a hyper-focused project that we got money through Mark to do. The other one also funded through Mark is a bi-state sustainability corridor, which largely connects the very far west of KCK to downtown Independence through KC-Mo, and specifically in our area, straight down Independence Avenue. That's a primary corridor that they are examining for that. And again, that is funded through Mark. This is a little bit further into the process. We've had 2 advisory committee meetings, which is a smaller group of neighborhood leaders and business owners and developers. Then we had a public workshop early in the year that was sort of focused on broad visioning for Truman Plaza. This one again is focused on transportation. We'll have another workshop in September that will be focused on neighborhoods, and an open house for the public close to October when we're finalizing it, so we can come back to the group and say, do you like what we recommended? Did the feedback you gave us get represented here? And in the meantime, we might have a handful of more advisory committee meetings sort of as needed to kind of flesh out some more details.
Go back. And then of note, coming up, so for this group, tell your network, we will be at National Night Out at McCoy Park on August 5th, so we're in the Blue Valley neighborhood. We'll also be at 2 back-to-school nights. We'll be at Garfield Elementary up in Clinton Heights, but we'll also be at J.A. Rogers down in Blue Valley. So you have any kiddos that go to those schools and you're going to be at back-to-school night, you'll see us there. So those are just 2 upcoming pop-ups that we'll be doing in addition to what you see on that diagram.
Yeah. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan, who's going to give us a rundown of the transportation analysis. And everybody got one of the sheets, right, that you can write on? Yeah, so if you have ideas and thoughts, just jot those down on there, and we'll take those at the end, so we can kind of collect them more uniformly.
So we'll be going through quite a few things relative to our transportation network in the Truman Plaza area. There's going to be a lot of information with that. There'll be times that we'll stop and have kind of a discussion amongst the group. However, in order to keep moving and be able to kind of build on what we're looking at and to get to the second activity towards the end, I want to make sure that you're using this kind of as a workbook. Write down, jot down your comments, circle things, X things out that you don't like. Whatever way that you can communicate by writing using this is going to be incredibly helpful, because then we will collect these at the end and take a look at them. So I want to first start off with a snapshot that's in the data book that we recently did for Truman Plaza. And it's really about mobility. So as you can see, not uncommon to the greater Kansas City area. Most people, when they go to work, they drive a lot. But something of note that is a little different than maybe other parts of the region is that we still, even though that's the majority, we still have a high percentage of people that rely solely on the bus to get where they're going to work, which is higher than the regional average. Generally, travel time to work kind of varies anywhere between the 30 to 34 minute range, which, if we're talking minutes in Kansas City, gets you out to 4:35 at rush hour. But then we also have quite a few people in this area that commute closer to home. So 15 minutes, depending on where you are, might get you to East Bottoms or up in the Northland. So it really kind of depends, but we have very few people that are commuting more than 35 minutes to work. So we're first going to start off with major streets. So if you flip your packet, it's the first page. So our major street system in the Truman Plaza area is already pretty much built out. There are a couple areas where the street grid kind of dissipates, and the reason why that is generally because of the topography, where you might have, a hill that slopes downward. That may make it hard to put a street through. It may make it also hard if you wanted to develop in that area because it's not nice and flat. But like I said, the area is mostly connected. You have several freeway interchanges along I-70, and then you also have one on I-29 as you go down towards the Bond Bridge. The area includes many of the original boulevards and parkways of what we call the Kessler Plan, which is how we ended up with boulevards like Benton Boulevard and Independence Boulevard. That was first created back in the early 1900s. So we're flipping to the next page. Next, we're going to talk about transportation safety. What you really see here is that we have quite a few major street segments that are on the high-injury network. And what that means is these are segments of streets and intersections with a high rate of severe crashes. These can be severe injury crashes or fatality crashes. So, like, for example, the red that you're seeing on your packet or on the screen, those are severe segments where you have 4 or more fatal or serious injury crashes occurring in that segment. The way this is broken down is by the quarter mile. So you see Independence Avenue extends through the entire area. It's, one of the more dangerous streets probably in our city, but also in the state overall. We also have instances of High, which is at least 3 or or more fatal or serious injury crashes. So you have segments of 12th Street, but you also have segments of Benton Boulevard and Prospect Avenue on there too. And then not shown on the map are segments of moderate where you have at least 2 fatal or serious injury crashes, but you have many more segments in this area that were just not shown on the map. So something of note that you'll see on the next slide is that Truman Plaza is 2.7% of the city's overall geographic area. However, it contains 13.3% of the high and severe high injury network segments. So we have quite a few areas that for all road users, whether you're in a car, whether you're biking, whether you're walking to transit or not, you have several segments that are really can be dangerous for all road users. What you'll also see on this map are you see a big hollow circle that's in red. Those are severe intersections. So areas where we have a high rate of serious injury and fatal crashes at intersections. In the orange, which are the smaller hollow circles, those are high injury intersections, which is the second highest designation. And then the green dots are where we have data, where we have actually collected speed data, where we have consistently excessive speeds. As you probably heard if you drive and you went to DMV class as a 15 or 16-year-old, speed kills. These are areas with high rates of speed. Higher rates of speed means less time to react to things that may happen in the roadway, more likely that you lose control and crash. So, but that doesn't mean that there aren't interventions or things that we can do to make our streets in Truman Plaza safer. So there's a term that you'll often hear planners and engineers talk about a lot called traffic calming. And what that is those are interventions that that slow motorized vehicles down to make streets safer for all users. It might be the addition of adding additional space for pedestrians or bicyclists. But it can also mean things like, curb bump outs or adding street parking in certain areas. You would be amazed the number of places in Kansas City that have street parking that you would not know because of the signage or the way that the street is painted is actually somewhere that you can park. I love to use Prospect as an example. That's my fun fact, is there are sections of Prospect that you can actually street park on that you never see people park on. So, that's one such intervention because you're just taking a lane that looks, 20 feet wide or more and just narrowing it, and that visual narrowness just helps slow traffic down. So this is a good kind of stopping point. Does anyone have any questions about our major streets or our traffic safety? Yes?
I read on some report online, I can't remember where, and I would love to find it again, that the city did a study of the data and showed that Independence and Van Run is the deadliest intersection in the entire city. Is that true? Did I read that right? And did the rebuilding, was there an impact study on how effective it is?
I can talk to you about that after.
That was actually also my question is, so we've had updates there, as I'm looking more specifically at Truman Road as well, with the Jackson, Hardesty, where the road has now become one lane. I know it sounds like probably for some of this traffic calming, like since then, how impacts that has been noticing, how it's benefited? Is it a
Yeah, actually, Truman and Jackson were working, sorry, this is Bailey Waters with Public Works, we're working to address the issues there, as there are still crashes occurring at Truman and Jackson, so I'm actively working on that.
But usually we try to get like a couple of years
Definitive answers.
We try to get a couple of years of data before we have definitive answers, whether it worked or not. So if there was something installed within like the last year, it might be a year or two before we can be like 100% yes, this works. Yeah.
So our input doesn't mean anything is not working.
I'm working on fixing Truman and Jackson.
We're working on it.
Okay.
I'm looking at Truman and it's not Hardesty. What's So we've got two Jacksons, we've got Jacksons on the north of Truman Road that then change into the, and right now that Hardesty down further.
So yeah, Rammer and Hardesty is to the east, and then we just have one Jackson here, and that's the part that terminates at 12th Street, where if you ever watch the buses, they'll take a right and then a left on the Spruce and go up to the next street. Because Spruce is the one that kind of like curves around in High Street.
So my question is, looking like this with the two slides we looked at, I'm thankful for the graphic, but I can't read the streets. So if I'm looking at the circles to know which your intersections are rated the highest incident, I don't know what street I'm looking at.
So this is a static map, so I can't zoom in, but we have an interactive map of what you're seeing on the screen that you can zoom in and see even the moderate segments. And that's on the Public Works website. And then eventually when we are working after this, after we're collecting feedback and working on this particular chapter of the area plan, we're going to incorporate that also into an interactive map that will sit with the text in the chapter, and you'll be able to also zoom and search and see it a little closer.
Would you like to know what they are right now?
Yeah.
Well, for us to discuss, are we discussing them now? Are we
We
just
can.
showing where they are? I don't wanna take the program out, but,
That continuous line up there is a good.
yeah, I know that part, but I don't know where the red circles are, what the intersections those are.
So on Independence Avenue, Benton and Independence, Van Brunt and Independence, Hardesty and Independence, and then Winter Road and Independence.
Before the bridge. That's when.
Winter's right after the bridge.
By the Alton.
Okay, okay.
And then on
That's
Truman,
Wilson, isn't it?
Truckee Bridge.
Yeah, that's Wilson.
Yeah, but it's actually.
Oh,
and then on Truman Road, it's the railroad tracks where, you know, the lanes kind of divide and goes back together. Jackson and Truman and Hardesty are the three severe intersections.
so that middle one, we have severe accidents at the bridge part, or at the intersection between? Is that the bridge?
Bales.
Okay.
And then
I think that was, yeah.
on 23rd Street, Jackson and 23rd.
Yeah, the cemetery walk,
And then Van Brunt on 23rd.
yeah, I definitely.
And then lastly, 27th and Van Brunt, right before Van Brunt and Hardesty kind of split off.
Yes.
Is another severe one.
And can you skip back up to 9th Street, please?
Sure. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed those. 9th and Prospect, 9th and Benton.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on to walking. So there are a couple different ways that kind of the formulas that make basically a nice walking environment or a very useful walking environment for folks. So directness, so how direct can I actually get to the destination I want to go? Do I have to go around some really large obstacle? Continuity, is there a sidewalk gap that is stopping me from getting from one side to the other? Street crossings, crosswalks, signalized or unsignalized, visual interests and amenities. So are there benches along the way that I can stop and sit? Are there visually interesting things like, you know, I'm walking under a bridge and there's a mural of the bridge eating a truck, for example. Public art. Really just ways that make that walk more pleasant. I think also an amenity can be trees. So it's really hot outside when the sun's beating down on you. It's much more pleasant to walk in the shade. Security overall, so can I actually cross and move around safely without potentially getting hit by a vehicle, motorized vehicle? And then proximity is referring to, am I within 5, 10, no more than 15-minute walk of everyday needs? So an everyday need can be a grocer, it can be a pharmacy, it can be a convenience store, it can be a school, and it can be a park, amongst other things. So the map that you're seeing here is we have a really high level of continuity despite all the different shapes that you're seeing on this map. What you're seeing are different sidewalk gaps that might exist. Something that staff noticed as we were looking is that we have sidewalk gaps, ironically, right next to our parks. So you get to the park and then you have no sidewalk to actually cross into the park. Yep. But we also notice areas like Van Run, which is a parkway or in boulevard, where there's sections where there's no sidewalk. Right here, the rectangle where we are between Woodland and Brooklyn, that's really because we do have sidewalks on the streets that we see here. The issue is we don't have the directness to get from north to south. We do pretty well going east to west, but let's say you're up at Independence and you're kind of in between the blocks and you can't get to the Gates Business Center because you have to walk all the way around and down because there's no direct pathway kind of through that is publicly accessible, meaning that it's in the public right of way to get where you need to go. There are also just physical barriers. The bluff to the north is a barrier that there's no level of earth moving that we're going to get rid of the bluff. That's also a really pleasant part. Freeways can also be a barrier because you have limited access points to be able to cross the freeway. The Blue River, limited access points to cross. Railroads are also limited, kind of a barrier because there's limited access to cross.
Is that what that yellow that's dissecting?
That's the KC Terminal Railroad. So what I marked in green on your map are possible barrier locations. So, if you're walking under a bridge or underpass, how can we make that connection and that walk a little more pleasant? Do we need more lighting even during the day because the railroad bridge is really wide and it gets really dark in the middle? Do we need nicer sidewalks under those, better drainage? Things that just make that experience a little more pleasant so that way you get where you need to go, whether recreationally or to reach those essential needs.
So can I ask a question on the intersection where we try to improve the connectivity to just cross the intersection? Independence and Benton. I know it's a traffic thing, but how's the walking part of it?
Independence and Van Run.
No, Independence and
And then,
That's still one of our high entry intersections, so it's.
yeah, I know the cars, but I'm asking, we're talking about walking now. We have information on, because we improved that intersection, about 10 years ago? So I'm wondering, is the connectivity for the walking part of that, show any data on if that's good or bad?
I think that's something that we could probably follow up on. If you circle it on the map, that'll tell us to follow up. Because one of the questions I do have for you is what streets or intersections are hard to cross where you are in the Truman Plaza area? So it sounds like Independence and Benton is one of those hard crossings.
Well, I think we improved it, but I'm not walking, so I don't know how hard it is.
I mean, I would say literally all of Independence Avenue. And which remind me to talk to you about what's going on at Garfield and Independence, because we were trying to figure out what the kayak ramp actually does. But Truman too, like two highway width streets that have really fast traffic are, like, they're not marked on this map because they technically have sidewalks and stoplights and areas that you could cross, but I mean, as far as walking friendly areas, I would not consider them places that I would choose to walk ever.
Yeah.
So you talking about the new road they cut over Salem, being able to walk from that area to school, over to that area you're referring to?
No, I was just saying that for all of Independence Avenue and all of Truman Road, I don't consider those to be like pedestrian friendly zones. But I was asking Bailey about a crossing at Independence Avenue in Garfield.
We'll have some time when John gets through these walking slides
we also kind of did a little bit of field analysis where we could, but also looked at kind of Google Maps and some of the other anecdotal information that we have from you all that we've been hearing about on the projects, and started marking hard to cross crosswalks. But also, we're limited and you have so much more knowledge of your area in terms of, you know, what are those hard to cross places that we wanted to ask you all before we fully mapped it and came back to you all.
I mean, can I just give you a couple sheets to put away? Independence and Smart, it's right at Sonic Hill.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, I know that's had hits all the time. St. John and Monroe, or that area-ish.
Okay.
A lot of kiddos crossing for their bus stop on the other side of St. John. So that's a big one that comes to mind. And then should I just write them down?
Go ahead and circle them. I'm just making sure that I have someone documenting them as well.
I wasn't, but if you circle them. I was gonna.
So St. John Monroe,
Independence and Smart.
Independence and Smart by the slide.
Sorry, I was doing two.
This is just for being a walking, but it's like, there are certain schools in the area that are very dangerous during the time when students are released. And for instance, James Elementary, when students went to my children there, because it was a two-way street, it was impossible to park on the street, and it was impossible to like walk. There were several students that came in. So is that something we can also put on this?
Yeah, that has to pertain to walking as well, because students after school or arriving at school are walking to their parents' car. I have not done after school dismissal in a while. Is it the issue being that kids are getting picked up on both sides of the street? Like cars are stopped on the other side of where James is, so kids are crossing the street in their
There was
parents'
also
car.
an issue where parents were parking on the wrong side of the street, since it was a two-way street.
Yeah.
So it was like, yes, and so parents would be trying to leave from both sides of the street in the same direction, because they were parked on the wrong side. And then it would make it really dangerous for students just to try to get across from one corner to the next. I know there's crossing guards, and then certain corners, but it's just a lot of times students are running in the middle of the street, or it just made it very dangerous. I think solution would have been one way street.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think schools are really interesting because you have all that traffic all at once for a period of time. So,
Buses.
especially a lot of the schools in Truman Plaza don't necessarily have a ton of off-street parking or the traditional bus loop that you might see in more the school with a lot of property.
Yeah, and just to provide some thoughts, I don't know a whole lot about the Kansas City School District and how students get routed to different school locations. I know obviously in different age ranges, they might go to a high school that they're not the closest to, but their elementary might be the closest one. But living on Garfield right across from SBN, it's disappointing how many cars I see. They don't have busing there, which makes them unique, but it is disappointing how many cars I see, even cars that are parked on my street that have these parking passes for student pickup. And when I've asked at SBN, how many of your students walk, I kind of get the impression that not a lot. And it's unfortunate because 80% of the kids who go there live within a 2-mile radius. So while I'm not saying kids need to walk 2 miles to school, I am saying that if they live on Garfield, they should be walking to SBN if they can. But I don't.
And they basically need safe routes to get there.
Yeah, I think the feedback I've gotten has been the environment is not safe for them to walk, not necessarily that there aren't sidewalks. And I think that's probably what's not illustrated by everything on this map is in this region in particular, we have a lot of environmental factors that are not just, is there a sidewalk, is there a way to get over a geographic feature. It's also concerns around safety in general.
Because I would walk my students, my children from Indian Mountain, they were there, and I go to James, because my son's special needs, the actual school would have been Gladstone, because special needs was at James. But walking, 6 blocks or so, the dogs, the amount of dogs out, that made it concern for us. That's also something we didn't involve.
So that's maybe the security side of lesson law. We're gonna go and move on. Go ahead and write down any of your comments on the packet. The last thing I want to highlight on this map is you can see the large purple circles. Those are areas where you have basically more than a 15-minute walk to a grocer, and you also do not have any sidewalks. So you could really have the safe and pleasant walk if you wanted to, because you already don't have the sidewalks and you're already more than 15 minutes away. So that's mainly centered around Blue Valley and right near East High School. And then the blue oval here near 23rd Street, that's a more than 15-minute walk to a school. And the reason why that's circled, and you might be thinking, well, it's not that far from Wheatley Elementary School, which is at Benton, near Benton and 23rd. The reason is the highway, so you're losing the directness and the continuity because you have a sidewalk gap there as well to be able to walk to the elementary school. The green oval up near Wilson Avenue, near Price Chopper, that means that you do not have any sidewalks in that area, and you're more than 15 minutes from a park. I know that that's more of an industrial area, but when we're thinking about how Truman Plaza may develop in the future, and we're thinking about how we use this area plan in the future as development, occurs and what staff might be asking of developers, it's really important to think about, proximity to a park in order to create that complete community for any residents that may live there in the future. If that area transitions more from an industrial use to more of a mixed, like residential or adaptive use.
So even if it's staying industrial, you want to incorporate green space?
I think you still need green space for your employees, especially if you're thinking about lunch or in beginning or end of shift, being able to access green space. But I'm talking about in this context specifically for quality of life for residents as well. So there are some actions that we can take. I kind of went through them, filling in the sidewalk gaps, looking at sidewalk condition. We have a lot of spaces where we have sidewalks but they're not in great shape. The city has gone through a lot of effort up to this point to map every sidewalk in the city, rate their condition, and be able to prioritize those replacements. And especially a lot of those are near our parks and our schools. And then, as I was indicating with proximity, making sure that there are additional services in the area or better and more direct connections to those services, so that way everyone has at least a 15-minute walk or less to those everyday services that they might need. Next, I want to talk a little bit about bikeways. So when I'm referring, we're going to talk about bikeways and we're going to talk about trails. A trail is a type of bikeway, but I'm going to talk about them separately. So the definition for our purposes of this plan is it's a space for bikes that is dedicated to just bike riders or just bike riders and pedestrians. So it can be like a shared use path where you might ride more recreationally and you might have pedestrians and cyclists, sharing that space, but not necessarily a car. And it can be, other things like you might see like a painted, bikeway that's right, in the street, basically, right next to the car traffic. So there are really two types. There's a major separated, which could be a one-way or a two-way shared path with some type of what we call vertical separation. So you might see on Dillon Road, the plastic vertical delineator. You might also see on Cleaver Boulevard the actual bollards and a concrete curb that actually separates that space in a little bit more of a permanent manner. And then a minor separated is a bike lane that's separated only either by a painted line or a painted buffer. So it's a painted line, bikes here, cars right here, or maybe there's a couple feet of buffer space in between the bike and the car to give a little bit more wiggle room. So right now on the map, what you're seeing is the existing major separated bikeways on the map. We have a section up on the Paseo near Maple Park and near Cliff Drive, where there's actually, as part of the Paseo Gateway project and reconfiguration of that intersection, a shared path was created off street. That's a really wide sidewalk that kind of follows the street. And then there's actually a trail connection from Cliff Drive from Columbus Park, so you can actually get down to the freeway from there. And then the other one is along Truman Road that extends basically near downtown all the way up to Hardesty. And then what we have mapped up here, and these are really preliminary that we need feedback from you all on, are kind of some of the different options that the staff started to look at in terms of what could be major separated bikeways in the future versus what are some potential minor separated bikeways in the future. And what we'll get into on the next slide is a little bit of a fun visual preference survey where you can help us determine what kind of, if you were to put a bike facility in Truman Plaza generally, what are some different options that you like or don't like and where we would put them, and then you can actually denote that on the sheet. So some additional major separated bikeway options include up along Lexington and then up along Gladstone Boulevard to really connect Maple Park to the Casey Museum and up Cliff Drive. 9th Street from basically Woodland Avenue or downtown to Winter. 12th Street is an option, although we just did a street diet there and it's been, in the process of finishing up. But basically from downtown to Winter Road, Van Brunt Boulevard. So you have median in Van Brunt, where you might have an option to put some type of separated bikeway to go north to south. To really connect you to like Blue Valley Park all the way up to the 9th and Van Brunt soccer fields. So there are really several options, but we kind of feel free to note on your packet, like X out what you don't like, circle what you like, tell us about it, and I'll give you a moment there and then we can have a brief discussion about that.
So you mentioned 9th Street from Woodland to possibly,
Winter.
Winter. So there's a strip of businesses on 9th Street on the side. How would the possibility of this major separated, how would that affect the businesses? Because I know, when you added the bike lanes on Truman Road, it really affected those businesses down there. So now is the time, because I have business on that.
Yeah.
How will that affect my business if I don't have parking available for our customers?
That would be like a performance consideration that you would look at if you were designing like a bikeway along 9th to say the business owners along 9th Street need on-street parking because they might not have off-street parking. So as you're studying it in the future beyond just this plan, you would say, okay, we need some type of street parking here. Does the actual public right-of-way width, so sidewalk to sidewalk, is there enough space to allow for street parking and some type of, bike way?
So my question is there a way for the other businesses along that strip to, because I don't see any of them here today, but I know they would be, want to get their input. Is there a way that they can email or contact someone to?
So something that we can do is we have a tool called Speakeasy that we can actually put this document up on and they can actually pin comments to it, kind of like what you're doing on paper, but just online. And that's something that maybe we can explore putting on Speakeasy for you all and for the business owners so they can actually go in, view kind of what you're viewing and then make comments. Yeah.
I have a question. What
Yes.
percentage of residents in Truman Plaza bike or are interested in biking?
Go back to,
Yeah, I don't have that in our packet, so I.
yeah, I'm gonna go back for just a second. So as of right now, it's a very small margin of about 1%. But,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Of course, right, analytics and all of that, if we put more, then people will probably bike more, right? I guess one of my concerns is that the interest, right? And then going back to what you had said earlier, like, I think about Truman, I'm on the Truman Outlook
because the snapshot that you saw up there is kind of this is a present day snapshot. The questions that are in the survey are gonna be like, if we added it, would you do it?
Okay, my concern then becomes, statistically, people who take surveys aren't, ethnically, culturally representative of the people who live in our neighborhood, right? So, people, who don't necessarily have English or Spanish as their first language, people who don't have access to technology and stuff like that, so, but thinking about Truman Road, right, where a lot of people aren't necessarily statistically going to take those surveys, those voices oftentimes get left out.
So this particular survey, which I understand that, and we want to make sure that we capture those voices, that this particular survey is going to be looking at the sample that it collects, basically those that respond, and try as closely as possible to match what is in the census. So it's not going to be perfect because not everyone also responds every 10 years when they get their census card in the mail, but it's as close of a tool as we can get to be able to ask these questions, not just about the census sample of what is now occurring, but what's in the future. Yes.
Quickly, can I speak to potential bikeways? So there is a minor separated bike lane on St. John from Elmwood all the way to Belmont Boulevard now. We have put in requests to finish that on St. John to go from Elmwood West all the way to Benton Boulevard. So there would be a minor separated bikeway all the way from Benton to Belmont. We got denied the request. So I guess maybe what I would say is we would want the Truman Plaza area, but Indiana Neighborhood Association would certainly want the Truman Plaza area plan to reflect that there should be a potential bikeway, minor separated bikeway along the traffic calming project along St. John, because it would be completing a project that we already have done.
Okay. That's a good action that we can put in the plan for the
Right, so
Yeah.
So I've got one more question.
Okay. I'm ready.
I believe it was at Monday's meeting, they had brought up having 10-foot wide sidewalks that could accommodate bikers and pedestrians. Would that fit into this neighborhood separation or non-separation plan you're looking at?
That would be one such example, because one of those types of paths can be either asphalt or like a 10-foot wide sidewalk. And you can either kind of run independently, kind of take its own journey, or it can run parallel to the road, which probably on Monday's meeting was what they were talking about, is it just kind of runs off to the side.
And I would add that not every bike facility has to be just like a bike lane in the street. A lot of them can work as also pedestrian pathways. So that's why we kind of want to engage what kind of bike facilities you guys want. Because maybe Truman Plaza is a place that wants more of a multi-use purpose for these bikeways. And they want to be more for pedestrians and different bikes. So that's kind of how we have this little visual survey, so we can kind of gauge what level of bike infrastructure you want. Do you want it like very hyper specific for bikes, or do you want it more like a mix of different modes?
So the next set of pages, we're going to go through a little bit of the visual preference survey moment. So what you're seeing in your packet on the screen are 3 such examples of what we would call more of a mixed traffic facility or mixed traffic bikeway. So like this example here is on Armour Boulevard. It's separated by the painted buffer, but then there's parking in front of it to basically separate it from moving traffic. This was our first foray into basically separated bike lane in the city. They've since gone back and made modifications to try to improve the parking to bike relationship. The middle image is what we call a bike boulevard, and these are popping up in a bike boulevard. And these are popping up in other cities. I know a couple years ago I was working on a project in Overland Park, and they were contemplating one near their downtown. And what it is it's essentially, it gives you traffic calming for motorized vehicles on a less busy street, like in a neighborhood. So it's generally trying to slow the motorized traffic down so that we are fully sharing the road with the bicyclists. But then you can add different traffic calming interventions, like let's say the neighborhood decides they don't want through car traffic down the street because they want it a little calmer for kids that might be out playing. You can do something like this where you actually have a sign that directs traffic to make a right turn, but then you can actually have a through path for bicyclists to be able to continue straight, because a bike is obviously moving a lot slower than a car and takes up less space. So that's like one such option. I'm not aware of any in Kansas City, Missouri, any bike boulevards, but it's a tool in the toolbox. And then the last image is what they call a shared street. Now, shared street is not dissimilar to what they're doing on like 18th Street right now, and 18th and Vine, where it's a curbless street. So pedestrians and cars are kind of all at the same level. In this scenario, pedestrians, cars, and bikes would be all at the same level, and traffic moves really slow through there because it's generally reserved for like a high pedestrian area.
So I'm curious because I thought the project at 18th and Vine was eliminating the cars and just making it pedestrians and bikes.
It eliminates the cars during an event, like they can put bollards up to stop traffic, so that then you can have like a festival street.
Yeah.
But I believe during the day, during off-peak, it'll be open to cars, but cars will just be moving slower because it's just, you're at the same level as pedestrians and it's just narrower.
Interesting. Okay. I think most people think you're closing it out for cars.
It has sort of been described as being like
A pedestrian mall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like a shared street.
On Armour, they went the other way. Here's my question. They switched. You said they made modifications where the bike racks are now on the other side.
No, they're still where they are. What they added is the issue was cars that were parking on Armour were parking in the bike lane,
Oh.
or you're getting like doored because they were so close to you. So what they did is they put these zebra-shaped kind of rubber. It's a puck. I don't know. It's like a cylinder there that basically lets the driver know, because you feel like you're tired, like you're good. You don't need to move any further over. So.
Personal commentary, I guess. You cannot see, like you go to the bank, you can't see. You have to inch out and almost get hit to even make your turn to act. Yeah, if you come out the bank parking lot, you can't see anything.
One more comment and we'll go on to the next one.
I was just going to say that I think based on some of the feedback that people have shared, and obviously there can be different strategies for different areas. Like protected lanes make the most sense when you have steep hills or like other throughways where it's impossible to get out of the way of a vehicle. And probably for this area, like, yes, there could be some protected lanes, but it would be more ideal to focus on opportunities for like the wide paths that can be shared use, as well as really, I think just slowing down the cars so that biking on the street can be safer should really be the number one strategy that's used, and ultimately maybe is the easiest to implement. I don't know if that is necessarily true, but
That's why I'm curious about the Truman and Jackson. You know, because there are bike lanes there now, but we just had that not that long ago at that intersection, right? So like, I'm curious to see
That
that.
intersection sucks. Even if you're driving through that, going east, if you're going east on that intersection on Truman Road, and you get to Jackson, and every car is like, what lane am I in? It is a mess.
So we're gonna go ahead and move on because I gotta keep moving. We have one more activity to do. So real quick, what you're seeing is the Gillum cycle track. This middle one, a bit blurry, is Cleaver Boulevard that was installed last year. So you have a bollard and then you have an actual curb. That's the separation instead of paint. This example is in the Boston area. I believe St. Louis has done this as well with their greenways, where you have the small vertical delineator, but you also have like the lamp posts moved further in. You have landscaping at the corner to add a little bit of visual interest and also provide a little bit of protection, visual protection. And then you actually have a physical change in materials. So you go from brick to asphalt to stone to concrete. It's obviously a little bit higher cost because you're mixing materials here, but that's another such option. Getting funny looks from Public Works because they're just.
Am I seeing the curve or is
You gotta
that
say a lot.
by the stone?
I think
Yeah.
I think there is.
Is that a curve or is that a painted line?
There's a curve here, and then this is a crosswalk, so the curve comes down and you can see the roll path.
There.
Over here, there's a small curve, but it's a roll curve.
Okay, it is a curve, okay.
Yeah.
Is that permeable too, so the water, I mean, the state would please them, but it'd be nice for water to drain.
I am not
A lot of hearts get.
It could be, especially in the Boston area where water is an issue.
I have probably walked on that. I couldn't tell you if it's permeable.
Last one, we're talking separated again, but now we're moving on to different shared use paths. So you have one example from Minneapolis where I believe this is in the Grand Rounds, but you have shared use path right next to the street. This one is from my home state where you have the shared use path kind of on its own right away. So more like what you would see in like a multi-use trail. Yeah.
But I just want to encourage the possibility of like that very last one, when the city already has plans for fixing sidewalks and adding sidewalks, see where this might fit into the existing plan and save the city costs, and still add more bike paths. But this last one would be excellent for a lot of areas that don't even have sidewalks right now. And I think that you could, if the two got together, the plan for fixing sidewalks and this plan, you could open up a lot of possibilities and save the city money.
Yeah, I will say with both of these, there's a higher cost involved, much higher cost. I think there are also opportunities as well where, like that big dot that I showed you where there were no sidewalks, is also near kind of there's a lot of hills there. But in the bottom, you're going through to create more like a greenway, like trail. There'd be more of an opportunity there. The one thing that we have to limit is we have a finite amount of resources and space. So it's, the plan's going to identify generally where these might be possible based on your all's feedback. But we're not able to do something like this on every single street.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
But we're dreaming here, right?
We are.
I mean, are you asking us to be like, oh, I know this is possible?
We are
Because I can
dreaming.
shut down all the time.
Dreaming within reason.
Okay, oh, dreaming with reason.
Yeah.
Well, then Gladstone Boulevard is pretty equivalent.
Okay. Because you can have.
A walk, mixed use, trail, target trail.
Yeah. So on the trails map here, I included Cliff Drive. It's technically not on our trails map, but it's close to vehicular traffic and it's functioning as a trail. We also have a regional trail on the far east near Blue Valley, near the Blue River, that currently the regional trail stops at Stadium Drive and Leeds. But it is on our plans to move it, to extend it further north. Something as well that staff looked at is where could we add trail connection in the neighborhoods so that way you can get to this regional trail once it's built out. So something that we are looking at is leveraging some of the public school property in this area and land bank property as well as some right of way to kind of try to get kind of further into the area and connect to the dam run. One of the goals that we were thinking as staff when we were looking at the map is there's really no trail connection from Cliff Drive to Blue Valley Park. So figuring out what's a potential combination that you can put in the plan in the future to help make that more robust connection. Bailey, you're about to say something.
I just would love a trail on Vanderbilt Boulevard, all the way from Gladstone, all the way south.
The councilwomen have been talking about doing like an east side greenway thing. And I mean, I don't know where they have envisioned that running along, but I was just talking last night about how we now are starting to get a picture of like what connectivity from the riverfront up into Kessler Park is going to look like. And as we start to talk about what this east side greenway will look like, we're really talking about the possibility
space as bike lanes or streetcar, because I have some friend from a much bigger metro, I don't know if it's Atlanta or something, and they said they do have that. They have bigger boulevards, you know, ours is tiny compared to that, but they have a complete dedicated streetcar down our equivalent of our say.
Yeah, like New Orleans does that in their neutral ground on some of the boulevards. But I think that's something that we can consider is creating an action when we're thinking about how we're planning trails and bikeways of leveraging the median or the neutral ground in our boulevards and parkways. You know, as funding becomes available, as you know, these bikeways are designed. So real quick, these are that's basically the system with the trails up. We still want to know whether there were some that are like yay or nay. We'll hold it for now, and then I will come see you at the end of the meeting. I'm sorry. Next, we're going to talk really briefly about transit. Currently, the Prospect Max is our busiest bus line in the region. It's also has it's the most frequent. So on this slide, you're seeing the term headway. That just means how often does the bus come during its peak time. Prospect Max, 15 minutes. Route 24, which is Independence Avenue, is 20 minutes. Routes 11 and 19 are 30-minute headways, and then the majority of routes at Truman Plaza have 40+ minute peak headways. If you are familiar with riding a bus, the general rule of thumb is if the bus comes about every 15 minutes, you do not have to plan your whole day around when the bus comes. Because, you know, if that bus doesn't come for whatever reason, you're waiting 30 minutes, you're not waiting like a full hour, for example. So as you can see on this map, we have quite a few transit routes through the area, but not all of them have, come all that often. So something that we heard, I think, from Mr. Fitzner at the last meeting is the idea of a max along Independence Avenue, or just upgraded transit in general. That's actually the subject of the Bi-State Corridor project that is going from KCK to Independence, is figuring out, you know, what's that enhanced transit look like on that long, almost 30-mile stretch. And that transit might look a little different if we're in the Northeast versus out in Legends, just because of density of jobs and density of where people live. So they're even looking at something even more enhanced in their study than the MAX, which would be like a full, more robust BRT or bus rapid transit system. Other staff recommendations when we were looking at the map was to increase the frequency on the 12 and 21 to like a 20-minute headway. Something that's really unique about the 21 is it's one of the few routes in the whole system that goes from up north all the way down south. And in the East Bottoms, you have I think you can see the Hills plant down there. You have major job clusters in the East Bottoms that are currently served by a transit route that comes, more than 40 minutes each time at the peak.
What cluster?
Just as you head down Choteau towards the Northland, and you're heading towards the Northland Target, that whole area is a huge job center.
Oh, a job cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and then the 12 also, it's another area kind of in the middle that, has a decent level of job access, because you're only really 3/8 of a mile off Truman Road, since we do not have transit on Truman right now. That would be another area where staff was looking at the system map and would be an area of increased frequency. Let me know in your packet whether there are other kind of routes, or wherever that route maybe runs in your neighborhood, like let's say it's the route on St. John, needs to run more, let us know. Or where on the map do you see that there's no transit at all that would be better served by having a transit route there? So additionally, when we're thinking about transit-oriented development. If you were around when we were doing prospectus for the part of Truman Plaza along 12th Street, I talked about transit-oriented development a lot. And transit-oriented development is a type of development that is really concentrating a mix of residential, commercial, and even industrial uses around the transit station. So that way someone can easily walk from their neighborhood, whether they live right by that stop or they maybe live down the route, can easily connect by bus to that area where there's a high level of activity and amenities. usually relies on having buildings that are closer to the street, having parking to the side or to the rear of the property if it's off-street, leveraging our on-street parking if we have it. Also, good design, so making sure that buildings, if they're up against the street, have transparent windows that are you can see in and out of. If it's a commercial, property, just for increased safety and increased, appeal if you're, walking there or taking transit. So some areas that we identified are right around KCU, where we are right now. Also 12th and Prospect and 12th and Brooklyn. Those were two nodes that are in the Prospect 4 zoning overlay. That overlay actually encourages transit-oriented development. The other area is along Independence Avenue, really leveraging, opportunities. Not saying, of course, we're leveling Independence Avenue, but as development occurs or as someone wants to do development, really leveraging density at those key corners where we have bus stops, as well as the northeast lofts where the Hardesty complex is another area of transit-oriented development. We did mark some areas along Truman Road. Truman Road is not currently being served by transit, but there are some key street corners where you can have the potential density if there was transit connections there for transit-oriented development.
Well, why isn't there a bus that goes down Truman Road?
So there used to be a bus that went down Truman Road, and the KCATA, the bus company, has discontinued that route. That is something that staff is kind of looking at as well, that there's a transit gap there. I am not sure on the history, but we're still working on researching why that route was eliminated. But if it's something that, might be important to you and your residents, we can certainly add that into the plan to say that we need service restored on Truman Road. Yeah, because there are a lot of jobs on Truman Road that could be served by transit that now do not have transit at all. So next, we're going to cover image streets and gateways. So this will be kind of close to the end of your packet, but Lauren's going to come up and actually describe what an image street gateway is, and then we're going to do a quick activity at the tables, and then we'll finish up.
Okay, so in image street, think of it as an entrance to the neighborhood. This isn't just any street. This is streets that kind of characterize Truman Plaza as a whole. Streets that typically take you into and through the area. So I think our four primary image streets. Our four primary image streets are Independence, 12th, Truman, and Van Brunt. And that's what we have marked. If you guys think that is accurate. Independence and Truman, obviously, the two major corridors that go through Truman Plaza, so we want them to be representative of the area. And then 12th and Van Brunt are another popular east-west, then one north-south. And these are the secondary image streets. And so when we think about image streets, we want them to have the highest level of design and character. So we might want to, Then we have gateways. These are like intersections, most likely, on these image streets that have landmarks that might help somebody know where they are. It could be freeway interchanges, district edges, intersections, changes character. So think about when you're in like the downtown area and you go in between districts, and you can tell when you're entering and exiting the crossroads. You can tell when you're entering and exiting the West Bottoms, Power Line, etc. So it might not be as that scale, but we want that in our communities as well, so people know this is Truman Plaza, this is what we represent. You're coming into our area, like welcome. That's what the industry and gateway is. So, like I said, this is the four main ones we have marked, and then we have five secondary industries. And then potential gateways that we identified. I'll just point out a few of them.
what's on the public street. Image streets are also informed by having high quality development around them. So having basically visually pleasing looking buildings and landscaping to help support that idea.
So, if you wanna, you can say this a lot, but you also write it down. If you think that there are any image streets or gateways that we missed, and that you think should be added to that list, that you consider a very representative area,
Yeah, Hardesty.
hard to say.
I feel like you're sliding this Van Brunt is helping you anchor sort of your east, north, south streets, like east side and north, south streets. But Hardesty also, from our neighborhood, Hardesty goes through this whole,
Yeah.
I mean, it needs Van Brunt just north of 23rd. So from where it meets Van Brunt all the way up, Hardesty is also going to hit a lot of these images, crossing events happening, we have interesting, like it's a gateway there, it's a gateway in St. John. And then I would also suggest 23rd Street.
Yes.
Right, I mean, 23rd Street, major thoroughfare, and it connects everything here to the valley.
I was gonna recommend 12th and Benton as a gateway area.
Oh, yeah.
You have a lot of restaurants right there at that corner, but it's also a gateway where people are turning off on one-way streets or dead-end streets
And I
to
said,
get to Independence Avenue or to
Yeah.
get to downtown. So I think that would be a major.
and that's where the gateway, the actual, like,
Yeah.
arches are, welcome to Old Northeast.
Yeah, exactly.
We got here and I was setting up these maps and I literally went,
Why didn't I-
we should have marked 12th and Benton because I missed it.
I want to give a shout out of how right you are, because Faye and I moved from Milledgeville, Central Kansas, scouting here, us sheltered white kids scouting the Northeast for the prices for the housing unit. To keep us from running streaming, it was this woman's vision of the CID, Bobby having her beautification program, just the baskets of flowers and all those dang murals everywhere. We saw the light, and then we saw the lighthouse through it. And
Yes.
those murals accumulated and created, and we said it before we ever met anyone here. We said it from the car. I think there's hope. And so if you took that to the next level and made it look remotely normal, like a remotely normal street, like it is in any way part of Kansas City, I'm afraid you're going to damage the YouTuber market of driving through the hood of Killa City. Because I get those things on my algorithm and I'm like, it's my backyard. Oh, yep, it's my backyard. I think I can see my house from here. Yep. So that would just complete that vision and just and be a huge blight record, bigger than what any basket that people can pee in or dump broken glass in or anything like that. Our flower baskets mostly hang real high. Yeah.
Can you say what the activity is? Because I feel like we haven't really gotten an opportunity to talk about like a collective vision for transportation in the area.
So let's go ahead and talk about
Oh, the activity, this activity?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know there was one more slide.
Well, this is actually the segue into the activity. So these are basically possible elements of an industry. So when we get development reviews that are on one of these industries, we want to be asking developers to provide the highest quality, either material or just like landscaping on these streets to contribute to the identity of these industries. So these are just a couple of elements. We'll have them on cards. So we have them printed out on cards, and everyone can break into groups, and we have 4 stations for the primary industries. So Independence, Truman, Van Brunt, 12. And then basically we just want you guys to kind of design them. We want you to design where
Street, it's a pretty residential street. If you also look at the way that the houses are positioned on 23rd Street, very few of the houses actually face 23rd, they're facing inward into the neighborhoods. It's not bad planning or bad design, it's just the way that those neighborhoods were created when 23rd originally was. If you look at 24th Street, for example, which runs parallel, pre-interstate, that was actually a business district. So it's a remnant even in the zoning, if you look at the zoning map, that there's actually commercial zoning along 24th, because that's where most of the commercial activity, the variety, diverse uses were. We don't have those now.
I guess like I'm not as concerned about it turning 23rd Street being a new street. I feel like it's kind of a vicious cycle that like the less that we invest effort, time, brainstorming into the south structure road and south, the more that would be the case, right? And like not necessarily that I'm saying I want a bunch of businesses on 23rd because you're right, it's very residential. But I just want to put that in there because I think that, you know, a lot of activity and effort and excitement is around Independence Avenue and north and right around that area. I think that there are a lot of voices of some of the most marginalized in our city that aren't being captured.
I do want to get to the activity. Something that we can do as we're rotating through is you can actually, there are pins and markers on those maps. So if there's like another image street that we're missing or another gateway that we're missing, there'll be a planner on each table, we can circle up and map it out. So what you're going to do is you're going to split into groups. There are 4 tables around the room. Each of them are the 4 primary image streets that staff have identified. There are different cards at the tables. So the cards are different elements that are kind of in the public right of way that could be an image street. Put the cards down on the map where you think this might be a good spot for them. Like Lauren was saying, we have basically, again, we need to prioritize where these locations are. So to place the cards, there are sticky notes as well where you can actually write down comments, but staff will be around and can talk to you as well. It's going to be a lightning round. We're going to have about 3 minutes per station, and we're going to rotate